Why, hello. You made it. You made the crossing. I'm so glad to see you. And as we are in France, we have to dress for the occasion. You like my dress? You like? Custom made. Custom made. Because we are in France and I am no little bourgeois English tourist. I am not staying in a hotel. I am staying in a palace, as you can see behind me, with other friends. So as one needs court dress to visit court and to dress appropriately, a la when in Rome, that is what we're doing. We are dressing a la Romans. Well, a la Française, in my beautiful new robe a la Française. And you like the hair? The hair, no more powder, white hair. Don't have to get showered in flour every time I move. So, we're here to discuss Les Liaisons Dangereuses. Now, Les Liaisons Dangereuses, I can't pronounce the author's name, so I'm just going to pop it up here somewhere so that you can see who that's by, because there is no way I can get my English-speaking tongue around that those words. So I apologise, rather than mangle, I'm just going to abstain from saying that name. But Les Liaisons Dangereuses is a novel, a French novel. Now, I found it very hard to find enough novels on the continent here compared to in England, because unlike England, Europe doesn't have yet the very, very strong novel writing tradition. It's coming from England into the continent. And this is partly because Europe is still a very collective country. So culture is around court, which is why we have court dress. It's around the salon. It's around communal activities. So the opera, the ballet, these things. So the novel as such is not so prevalent a art form as it is in England, though English novels are coming into France, and that is having an influence on the way that French writers write. French writers also generally have a much more of a philosophical bent to their novels, which makes them quite different from the English novel, which are not so philosophically inclined, which you will find as a big difference in in the novels that we have a look at while we are in France. So our novel is Dangerous Liaisons. And Dangerous Liaisons involves a bet between the Marquise Merteuil, who is a wealthy widow, young, attractive, wealthy widow, and the Viscount de Valmont, who is a rake, a roué, a libertine. And these two characters have a history. And Merteuil, the Marquise, bets Valmont because she doesn't like Madame de Tourvel's husband. And she also doesn't like Cecily, and I can't pronounce her last name, so I'll pop it up here, Cecily's betrothed. And she has come up with a little way to play with people. Now, one of the things that makes Dangerous Liaisons so different from something like A Sentimental Journey that we had a look at last time is the characters are governed by that purely Enlightenment concept of rationality. The idea of emotion and sentiment is foreign to them. These are actors who are plotting out their moves like on a chessboard, and they are treating other people like pawns on a chessboard that they can just play with until they get a winner. So it is very, very, their behaviour is not moral, and it's not governed by emotion. They are cold. They are so cold in this. So the Marquis bets Valmont that he cannot seduce the incredibly virtuous Madame de Tourvel, and in exchange, if he wins, and he has to provide written evidence of his win. He cannot just say he did it. He has to provide evidence. In exchange, she will destroy the wholesome virginity reputation, yada, 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 of Cecily, who, and if she can do this, she wins. So it's this very, very calculated roles that they're playing. They're very calculated, they're very cold, and they're playing with other people's lives. So it's quite nasty. It's a nasty book. They are villains. The villains are at the centre of this book. So what follows is letters. The whole book is written in letters. Letters upon letters upon letters upon letters, wherein this vast plot is played out. Now, the playing out of this plot ends up with people being destroyed and lives being ruined and all the sorts of things that you would expect. And of course, it's one where the villains do get their comeuppance in the end, which was actually rather odd for the genre of novel that Dangerous Liaisons sits in, which is called a libertine novel. A libertine novel has a very political and philosophical history behind it. It started out as a way of criticising the church, the state, things that people wanted to be able to criticise but couldn't criticise openly, so they did so in these forms of novels. These novels then quickly devolved into just pornography, really. But you still see in the libertine novel, for instance, in this novel, and for instance in the writing of the Marquis de Sade, which is very, very pornographic, so we're not going to have a look at that, but still has a philosophical concept behind it. It's terrible. It's not good writing, and it is grossly pornographic. But it does still retain that philosophical underpinning that is a challenge to the society. So that is what a libertine novel does. Frequently, libertine novels let the villains, the libertines, just get away with it because it's more fun that way. But Dangerous Liaisons doesn't. And this is what becomes part of the difficulty in pinning down what this novel is actually about. It doesn't give up its secrets easily. It's very hard to even work out what exactly the characters are doing, because the whole thing is told in letters, and these letter writers are not reliable narrators. There is not a single reliable narrator in this entire book. We don't have anybody who can tell us what the objective truth is, which makes this quite interesting, because if we have no objective truth, then what exactly has happened? We have outcomes, but we don't have a stepped back narrator. So even though we have unreliable narrators in Lemuel Gulliver, or Parson Yorick's a bit of an unreliable narrator, and Tristram is a bit of an unreliable narrator, these are genuinely unreliable because they are deliberately seeking to deceive one another. They're playing chess, so it makes it very, very interesting in that regard. Very different kind of book. But it doesn't help in terms of interpreting this book that the author is minor aristocracy. The author is himself a Jacobin. The author, though not a revolutionary, off with your head aristocrat, kill the aristocrats type of revolutionary, he is, though, interested in the attempts to have the King Louis XVI's cousin replace him. So there is this revolutionary quality to the author, but at the same time, he's not criticising the society that breeds these monstrous people. He's actually not criticising the aristocratic society as such. He is criticising people who do this. And so it renders him very, very unstable and difficult to read. He has defied reading, and his book has defied reading since it was written. So it is very, very interesting in that regard. It's not exactly an explicitly feminist work, although he had interests in women's education and the fact that women's education was so lacking that they could fall victim easily to a seducer like Valmont. But at the same time, his treatment of Merteuil does not suggest that he has any great sympathy to women. It is an unstable book. The other thing is, it's tapping into the idea of the epistolatory novel. The epistolatory novel is a novel told in letters. So as I've said, these letters mean that we have no single reliable narrator, but there's also that idea that the letters are collected by an editor, that the author is actually the editor of these letters, and that these are real people. So epistolatory novels are a bit like reality television. We know it's constructed, but we like to pretend it might actually be real. Of course, we know they just get them, lick it up and put them in a confined space and give them nothing but to squabble against each other. So obviously it's not real. These books worked in very much the same way. People got sucked in. They wanted to really believe this is real. So much so that people started saying, I'm so-and-so, I'm based off this. Obviously characters who survived the novel, not others. But so it really confuses reality and unreality because of the nature of this as letters. So that gives it another level of difficulty in reading. We will have another look at another book that suffered a similar fate when we go across to Germany. So as a writer, what can you learn from these novels? Or this novel? Well, I would like to say that what you can see is that you have a quality of, just because we have a concept of a novel or a way of telling a story, doesn't mean you can't experiment. Now, you may not be able to make money or publish experimental novels. Novels made of emails are actually quite boring. But it doesn't mean you can't create several Twitter accounts and link them together and narrativize them. You can't create a narrative, an online narrative that grows and develops and people can follow and people can slowly develop over time. These are things that the epistolatory novel can signal coming. It's not, you're not going to write another epistolatory novel, though I believe Bridget Jones's Diary is a form of a series of diaries. There are lots of diary novels, though they're really an extension of first-person narrative. These are also first-person narrative, but they're first-person narrative with a twist. The twist being that it's unstable. It's a very unstable narrative. So, and the more moving parts you put in, the less stable it becomes, which is how you end up with such a gloriously interesting but fiendishly difficult novel to interpret as Dangerous Liaisons. So, that's our novel for this month. I hope you have some fun. We will be remaining in France, and next month we will be coming along with the Abbé Prévost's Manon Lescaut. So, until I see you again, farewell.